got a few. Yeah, great. We've got a few folks in the waiting room. Dan, if you can let them in. I see Jeff is there. Um, and we're gonna really get started in the interest of time. We'll go for 35 to 45 minutes and then leave time for questions at the end that we'll answer. Um, a couple of just logistical programming notes. Um, the questions, if you have them along the way, please pose them in the chat. We'll get to them after we do the presentation and the content webinar. Um, this event is not open to the press. So if you are a member of the press, we would invite you to please um, remove yourself from the meeting. Um, and we, as I mentioned, will be recording this, and we will be sending out the slides and the recording to everyone after the webinar. They'll also be on that same landing page that you registered as you go. So that is the preamble, and we're going to dive in on the slides here and really get rolling. And the way we've done these webinars in the past is really, we're here to really help you be successful in this roadmap and pathway of non-dilutive contract funding to the Defense Department, DARPA, broadly speaking. And if you're not familiar with Grant Engine, we are a full service firm. We're very selective about who we work with. And then when we engage, we're all in as a firm. I'm going to do a quick overview. So our agenda, we're going to talk about defense themes, the implications for you and other companies in the space, where we're headed as it relates to defense tech, broadly speaking, and go into details around individual programs and how to approach. So that really, we're here to help add value for you and to you. A little bit of background about who you're hearing from, and why we are qualified and eminently capable to support you. My background is I've got an aerospace engineering undergrad and an MBA, spent many years working what is now GE Aerospace and their GE Energy divisions, was a venture capitalist for 7 years, and really found I loved being inside early stage companies, a combination of technology companies and life science firms. And our effort at Grant Engine really was created out of a fundamental need to help get grant funding for my own companies. And that has been very successful. And over time, colleagues and friends really started asking us for help. And that has yielded a natural extension of supporting outside companies. We are about 77 people in total. And we're really here for defense companies and other industries to save lives and extend the length of a quality life. That's our mission, and that's what we do in getting funding, where we support obtaining funding for you and your company, bringing that product in a fielded environment or to the infrastructure that supports the warfighter in the mission of saving lives and extending that length of quality life. We are tracking our win rate longitudinally of being 2x to 4x better than the national average. So that really depends on the mechanism and where we go. Madhav has an excellent background. He is part of Grant Engine's management team and has a very effective skill set in helping bring early stage companies through that process, understands how governments make decisions, and is very, very effective at bringing product through. So you'll hear from him as we talk. A very brief, just again, so for context of how you know and who Grant Engine. We generally have an approach that we work with clients along a find, win, manage approach. We do upfront planning as well, but really we help clients find opportunities, help them win opportunities, and then post-award do accounting and compliance. We're generally not supporting on R&D or program level support, but but staying inside the lines on post-award accounting. Within the win portion, we really have a range of different offerings, and that is useful regardless of your budget. So going left to right, we have an AI writing tool called Alpha, which is very effective at helping write a first draft. And that's a platform that you use and you write the grant yourself. On the far right-hand side, we write the grant for you, or really more often in a defense environment, the contract. And it's a full service environment where you've got the full force and power of grant engines supporting you. Matt will walk us through how that works in more detail later. And then in the middle, grantsmanship or contract tune-up plus external review. Red teaming is a core part of our process in that external review, and we've got a couple of flavors of that. So the budget amounts go from the left to the right in the just under $200 a month. On the left-hand side for the bigger projects, 20 grand and above. And we do charge a very nominal success fee as well. And one of the principles of our revenue model is we always lose money on any cash upfront payments that we charge. We're really in it for success for you. So that's a little bit about what we do and how we do it. And we're happy to talk further off the webinar if you would want. I wanted to, and we'll turn our attention to the real content now. And this is really a prelude slide to really set up your tax dollars at work. And we'll talk about what's been effective in the space and how to navigate it. But I wanted to just quickly look at the environment that we're in a historical context. And if you're a fan of history, as I am, you would have known of or read the full 6-volume book of Edward Gibbon's, the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. And the principal thesis that Gibbon wrote is that countries and empires fall and lose their place in history, lose their position in a historical context when they lose the internal strength and cultural cohesion that made them great. External enemies can only defeat a country or an empire that has already hollowed itself out from within. And as we think about the next 10 years, the next 100 years for the United States of America, maintaining that strength and fiber of our culture and our country is paramount to our long-term success. We contrast that with what John Winthrop wrote in the period before the American Revolution and before the country was really formed and solidified. And this was quite popularized when Reagan was in office, where we talked about a city on a hill that Winthrop talked about before America was founded, that it's meaningful, this idea of a country is a city upon a hill. It's meaningful because it captures this idea of American exceptionalism before America existed, that this new society has at that period a divine mission, right? A higher calling to model living righteously and living well. And this country has endured as a symbol of national purpose, moral leadership, and the weight of public example. And as we think about positioning your company and other companies in this context of using public money, we all have a responsibility to use those funds to bring product into market that is going to improve our national security, improve our position in a way that does it in a morally fibrous way, in a morally authentic way. And we're bringing that, we help clients bring product to market that has a favorable outcome for our national defense, for individual patients, for the warfighter, and for our broader society. So the future is up to us. I think we'll talk about the changing landscape in defense contractor writ large here in a moment, but it's up to us. It's up to you to do this and to do it well. So I wanted to just ground that. It's your tax dollars at work, and we want to do this effectively. So in that backdrop of context, we wanted to start with just themes that are happening in the defense arena. And this is national defense is a higher need than ever before. That is true now more than it was 5 years ago. It was true 10 years ago more than it was true 100 years ago. The world and landscape is changing, and the companies that have supported our national defense, call them primes or legacy primes is the way we're thinking about it, are giving way to emerging companies. And the frontiers of science and warfare and defense are dominated by innovators. You think about SpaceX, which is not a defense contractor, but they changed this idea of using reusable rockets to drive cost per quite low. Musk has a burn the ships operating philosophy, if you're familiar with that reference, where Cortez left Cuba to explore Mexico, and there was some unsureness about whether that was going to be successful. And when he and his team arrived at the shoreline, after a couple of weeks, he burned the ships, and they had no choice but to be successful. There was no way to get home. And that philosophy of we're going to be successful no matter what is embedded in the DNA of a SpaceX. And while they're not a defense contractor, their Starlink platform became the only means of communication for Ukraine to communicate within command and on the forward operating teams. And that was really just a revenue model that, I say just, it is the revenue model for SpaceX on the way to colonizing humanity as a multiplanetary species. And the theme here is that SpaceX was and is an example of a burn the ships operating philosophy, got introduced to a warfare environment, and because of their tech. Anduril is a more clearly defense-focused company where they have autonomous warfare superiority with the design, the manufacturing, and in particular, their supply chain that is flexible, capable, and more advanced. When they design a set of landing gear for their autonomous aircraft, that landing gear is commercially available. There are 3 or 4 sources of supply for that landing gear, so it's not required to be so specific and dedicated to one group. And what Palmer Luckey intentionally has built, and he and his team have built, is autonomous vehicles in sea and air and land that are able to have redundancy on supply chain. So if one source of supply is not available, they've got 3 or 4 or more additional backup. The design is sophisticated and is autonomous, but the practical reality of that supply chain is another element that gives them big advantage. Palantir, well recognized and deeply capable, widely adopted. They're deeply integrated. This idea of embedding, you will see on this call as a theme. They had In-Q-Tel as an early investor, and they forward deployed engineers on the ground to make sure that their approach was useful and was mission forward for the users. Their brand is contrarian and often polarizing. That was very much intentional and continues to be intentional because it resonates with national security stakeholders. If you've read Alexander Karp's book, he's the founder and CEO, The Technological Republic, he's not shy about articulating provocative points, and they do that because they're there to make a statement and make an impact. And then drone warfare writ large, we've seen this on the battlefield in Ukraine of it being gamified, where really a rudimentary physical technology of a drone paired with a munitions device distributed through fiber optic cable is very effective because they're innovating with rudimentary technology. We're seeing that with Anduril, that AI autonomous craft is operated in conjunction with human warplanes. The characteristics of these companies as on the vanguard is that they used at-risk capital to develop their products and make progress. The things that they did were leveraging at-risk capital to make progress versus a legacy prime that would use cost plus contracts where delays and cost overruns financially really weren't bad. They actually were good from a bottom line standpoint in a cost plus environment. That's not good for getting innovation on the battlefield and to protect our national security. But that's how that has always been done because of the risk they undertook. These new companies are taking a different model where they're taking their own risk and that of their investors. They have a startup mentality. They are progressing in a way that they want to rapidly iterate, get an MVP that is designed with the mission in mind, and that's the primary directive, and iterate quickly on improving that approach. They are architected from a culture and a perspective that success is the only option. These are the companies that are on the vanguard, and you'll see here on the next two slides how big a deal that is. These are legacy primes. There's 5 big ones: Lockheed, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, and the Defense Space Division of Boeing. And this is, everyone's familiar with what they do in their respective domains. And here's a quick snapshot of their financial picture in terms of revenue size, ranging from, call it 50 billion to 82 billion, market cap ranging from 74 billion up to just under 190 billion. And then their growth rates, you see here on the right-hand side, that they're all single-digit percentage growth, which is not horrible given their size. It's slower as you think about this in the startup or the high growth innovative company environment. Value divided by their trailing revenue, which is just that market cap divided by last 12 months of revenue, is also all below 3, right? And sometimes 1.5, right? So this is a way that the markets are wise, generally speaking, and the market is identifying these companies as this range of value. And these companies have that cost plus contract architecture in their DNA and in their revenue model. As we talk to these companies and really explore how and why innovation happens successfully, you hear we'd rather have people stay than have the best people, right? They are perceived as being safe, but for us, that's a question mark, right? Compare that to these two companies that are early in their life cycle, relatively early. I mean, Palantir's been around for over a decade and a half, but they're pretty early and small, where you can see the revenue's small. The market cap, however, is dramatically higher. Before we were in the under 3, now we're 10 times that, or 30 times that, or 200 times that is what Palantir's valued at. You can see the growth rate, absolutely a smaller base, but what is driving that valuation is not only their current growth trajectory, but also what they represent in terms of being able to bring innovation in a rapid iteration, being able to keep the vanguard of advantage to the United States versus other models that are cost plus and have a mentality about it can go slower They don't want that to happen, but that's just embedded in their culture. And I'm not being negative about a Boeing or a Raytheon or a Lockheed at all. It's just the culture of how they were built and how they operate. And there's a stark contrast to these startup companies compared to these legacy primes. And then I'm going to touch on this quite quickly in the interest of time, but where we're headed is that defense and kinetic operations have evolved to electronic and drone warfare across air, land, and sea. They require covert infiltration and defense for that. They require supply chain redundancy and fluidity and the application of applied intelligence. And as we talk to the groups on this call and in other areas, there are many frontiers of success. Certainly AI and autonomy is an area, zero trust architecture, where each step in the chain needs to be validated continuously. I think unmanned first-person viewer drones and autonomous vehicles are happening in air, land, and sea, as well as cyber. Quantum sensing for navigation using gravimetry to identify underground tunnels, hidden objects is a key area. The ability to unlock quantum computing, as we think about this as a years to quantum, would render the security of privacy that uses long chain key for security access and clearance. That's an unlock. So there's a race in that arena. Digital twinning and synthetic training environments to not only emulate planning, but also full mission profiles. So these are areas that I would imagine each of the participants you are working on or have some near or close fields to these and other areas. And these frontiers of innovation is where success on a defense basis will occur, or where that will not occur. So again, success is mandatory for us. I've got two more slides, and I'm going to hand it over to Madhav. This is really the overall pathway that you would follow that many of you are familiar with, but it just articulates a couple of key points. And Madhav is going to go through for us in more detail how to make these successful and where to go. But it's a point that as you have a lab-based product or you're very early stage, there are a successive or sequential valleys of death that need to be navigated successfully. And each are necessary to deliver if you want to become a program of record and a company of record in the eyes of our society and defense. And that's really what we're here to do, is help companies navigate this life cycle. So it really starts with the SBIR program, which are very effective. This snowball effect of getting early money that is lower. DARPA usually is involved with more bleeding edge and leading edge tech that can be involved. And then doing work with cooperative research agreements via CRADAs to military stakeholders is an effective way to not exchange money, but exchange traction. We'll talk about the importance of embedding and being close to the users here in a moment. But the first step is to get to a working prototype and to some extent a product. The next big evolution and threshold would be to get a product that is fielded or in use. There's the accelerating procurement for innovative technology, fielding and innovative technology and AppFit. The Defense Innovation Unit is quite involved in this transition from prototype to product. The arenas around rapid defense and experimental reserve are also very effective in that navigation. But that's a big jump to get to a field of product that's in use and is having traction in its reflected intended use. And then the next big valley of death would be to get to scale and become a program of record. Right? There are crucial things there that make that work. And along the way, these happen not chronologically or product evolution, but across the board, building relationships with the groups that allocate those funds tactically in terms of PEO teams and leadership. Progress here is not just on the military stakeholders, but also in a political environment. So understanding who makes up the House and Senate Armed Services Committees and the Defense Appropriations Committees is necessary for really unlocking some of these larger budget amounts. And then mandatory is going through increasingly rigorous government reviews of cloud security, cybersecurity, ITAR, and other pieces. So these are elements that are necessary to navigate. Grant Engine has deep capability in finding and winning you funding. We also have an excellent set of relationships with lobbying firms and other business development organizations that can help you navigate how to get in and navigate these pieces. So if you're not familiar with how to go build advocacy and champions inside your group, this is a quick 1, 2, 3, and this is really a lead in to the next slide, which Madhav will pick up for us, around how to embed. And in the rule of 3, we've come up with 3 steps that help lay the groundwork. And this is quite tactical. And Madhav will bring us up at a strategic level and then also bring us back down to tactical. How do you execute this? The first is you want to identify who you want to talk to and who your champions can be. There are a great number of ways to do that, from identifying program managers from issued solicitations or publicly in those agencies. Who runs the SBIR programs? Who is the point of contact for the BAAs or other transaction consortium? And then there are outward-facing folks at DIU, at AFWERX, at SOCOM for Tech Scouts. And then there's transition offices that various agencies are actively going outbound. You can find out who these people are without an inordinate amount of work. And you can find public tools to find them and engage. And we have got a list that is long and distinguished of contacts that we've built up over the years. We have the tools and resources to help you unlock your success. You can look at award documents, see who's attending events. The hyperlinks are in that slide that you'll see. And then panelists that sit on webinars is a great approach. And then you need to reach out to them, and you need to do so with purpose. You can reach down on LinkedIn, you can send them an email, go to events, follow up afterwards. And that message you want to send to them is really to lead with the mission, right? This is a way to get embedded, and you want to lead with that mission first mindset of what is the warfighter problem that you're going to solve, or that you want to understand before you solve it. What's the problem that has warfighter infrastructure around it? Reference priorities, recent memos. There's usually a requirement or mandate that you want to draft behind. And then ask for a conversation, offer to give a demo or a look and feel. Part of their role is to make their mission successful, and they're there to help you do that. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Madhav, who's going to share his screen so that he can navigate his slides. And just as Madhav is pulling that up, just a reminder to please ask questions if you've got any along the way. We will answer those towards the end. But yeah, fire away on the chat and we can answer them. So Madhav, over to you.
All right, thank you, Sam. So moving on, this slide, the question is, so from the previous slide, Sam talked about embedding into the DoD, right? And why is this important? The reason why it's important is because, once you understand how the genesis of defense funding comes about, which starts with the setting of requirements, right? So requirements are essentially documenting the needs and operational priorities from users. And so as you can see on this infographic, it's not a straightforward process of one group decides the requirements and then it just gets passed down the chain down to where the development and acquisition goes out and publishes solicitations to actually get products in the door. There are many different parts of this wheel, essentially, where you have users who are involved with applying their knowledge and material solutions to refine the requirements. There's the research and the science and technology side of it, who are also, functioning with external partners, understanding what some of the requirements are, what some of the products that might exist out there already are, that helps refine the requirements as well. So by embedding in the DoD, you get a feel for what the users need. You also are letting them know what your product is and what kind of problems it can potentially solve. And therefore, all of that can help refine the requirements, because at the end of the day, the requirements that are set out are going to justify the budget that the DoD is going to get, or the different agencies are going to get for the different grants that they put out, or solicit contracts that they put out. And therefore, that money then becomes available to small businesses or other organizations to go after for their product development. And so at the end of the day, yeah, it is quite a critical piece, which is, is sort of, embedding yourself in the DoD, understanding how this all comes together, and therefore understanding that, building those relationships early can go a long way in setting up yourself up for success. All right. In terms of defense contracting, there are many, many divisions within defense that you can potentially approach for, put as your potential customers for your product, right? So, I've on the left-hand side on this particular slide, I've listed a lot of those different divisions. And on the right-hand side, we talk a little bit about the different contracting mechanisms. So if you think back to the slide that Sam presented a couple of slides back with the Valley of Death, a lot of these showed up there, right? So SBIR, STTRs are usually the best, possibly the earliest point of entry for startups into DoD funding. It's a phased approach where they have phase 1 and phase 2 grants, and then a phase 3 commercialization piece as well. And then there are some other potential contracting mechanisms that you can look for that bridge that gap, that valley of death, essentially, through mechanisms such as the strategic funding increase or the tactical funding increase. Now, this is particularly from AFWERX, or the Air Force Ventures division, and then you have the APFIT and the RDER that come from other different divisions within the DoD. And as you can see here, one of the things I would suggest to everybody is get yourself familiarized with abbreviations and acronyms, because the DoD loves to use that, right? And as part of your grant proposals as well, you probably end up using a lot of those along the way. Another interesting contracting mechanism can be other transactions and other transaction agreements. Again, these are mechanisms that allow you to get directly in touch with users within the DoD and able to provide product solutions that are already into a prototyping phase or beyond. And another, the last mechanisms involved here can also be through teaming. And what I mean by teaming is there are some big players out there who have received large contracts from the DoD already, and they are, they're able to provide that money to different smaller organizations for parts of solutions. And so you are able to get into the DoD without actually going through a grant process, but teaming up with a larger organization that potentially already has a contract with the DoD. One of the disadvantages of this is that the scope of some of those are pretty limited, because it depends on what that initial contract would have been for. But as I mentioned, the early entry point for startups tend to be the Department of Defense's SBIR STTR program, right? It's a phased approach. Phase 1 is usually the proof of concept, sort of work that you might be doing. Phase 2 usually goes into the prototyping aspect of your products. And again, the budgets in phase one and phase two might not be substantial, but it's essentially like getting your foot in the door, right? Once you get that foot in the door, you start pushing your entire body through it, because the real money starts coming up when you get into that phase three part of it, where you can transition into more of the commercialization piece. There's also, as I mentioned earlier, with the Strat 5 and TAC 5, there are mechanisms available to bridge funding gaps as well. But most importantly, what winning an SBIR provides to you, more than just the money, which is obviously non-dilutive funding, is the credibility associated with having gone through a process where you have been reviewed and considered as, a potential for success, right? And you also get a direct line into DoD customers. In this particular slide, I have also highlighted a few of the SBIR STTR programs from the Army, Air Force, and DARPA, and some of the other participating divisions as well. And as you can see, most often the money kind of stays same between the different divisions, and they all have their own focus in terms of topics. And so you need to go out there and read those solicitations to truly understand what each division might be looking for in terms of a solution and those requirements that are set. There are other specialized defense programs, and I've listed a few over here. This is not all encompassing, obviously, but some of the ones that you can definitely look out for: the broad agency announcements. These are larger sort of grants or contracts. They're competitive solutions that are looking for innovative research proposal. They do tend to focus on scientific and technical challenges. BAAs, each of these individual divisions tend to put out their own BAA. So they tend to have different scope and different requirements as part of those broad agency announcements. And then there are also some of these, within the Army and within the Air Force, they have essentially like venture wings where they do pitch competitions and challenges from which you can get money as well. So Army XTech, the AFWERX challenge are good examples of it, where you can get cash prizes, but along again with the money, you're also getting follow-on contracts likely with the DoD. You're getting direct exposure into experts within the DoD and stakeholders that are then able to set requirements in future instances where your product then goes through a development pipeline and have a ready customer willing to buy your product. CDMRP is another great mechanism through the defense program. This is more focused on healthcare. They're looking for innovative and impactful research since through fiscal year 23. I think it was set up in 1999, if I'm not mistaken, but they have awarded almost more than 21,000 awards as of the fiscal year 2023, right? And there's various topics and indications that are supported through it. The solicitations generally release in that April-May timeframe, with submissions due in the June-August timeframe. July-August timeframe, I mean. So the way we see it at Grant Engine, again, going back to Sam's theme of the three-step process, for winning strategic non-dilutive funding. The first step in that process is obviously strategy and planning. It is understanding what is the land opportunity landscape that exists out there, right? Understanding all the different mechanisms that the DoD might have, understanding what might be suitable for you, assessing those solicitations, looking for the requirements listed in the solicitation, making sure that you have a fit in terms of the requirements versus what you are proposing as a solution, and making sure you're competitive as well. And so you, based on the research that you do, again, when you work with Grant Engine, we work with you on this and we help you, we guide you through this process and help you make those decisions on what the right opportunity might be for you. The next step in that process is, again, embedding yourself in there. So which is creating that agency buy-in, right? So you want to, depending on the mechanism, this might look very different. So in some cases, it might be building relationship with the decision makers and champions. It might be collaborating with a lab, within the DoD so that they can do some of the work for you. It might be just getting letters of support from these decision makers and champions. In some cases, in bigger contracts, you might have to engage a lobbying firm and do some business development activities as well to really set those requirements so that it kind of, it leans towards the product and the solution that you're providing. But at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure you're aligned with the needs of the particular solicitation or the particular goal that the DoD is trying to get to, and you're getting that agency buy-in from them. The third step, obviously is probably in these, the easier of the three steps, which is the proposal preparation itself. That is where once you have identified your solicitation you want to go for, you've identified your champions within the agency, you start putting together a strategy behind the grant, right? And as VP of Research at Grant Engine likes to say, in most cases, that's quite an open book test, because it tells you exactly, in the solicitation what the review criteria are going to be, and therefore you are going to work to get, using that as a template for determining the best strategy for your grant, not only from the review perspective, from your, from your business strategy perspective, what makes sense in the timeline that you're planning on, providing. You create that grant thesis, and that really sets you up for success for the proposal. You build that qualified project team around it, and have the right people helping you with the proposal itself. And then, you craft a competitive and winning proposal and you get it submitted. And the funding timelines at the DoD can again vary depending on the mechanism you go after. For some of the SBIR, STTR grants, or some of the BAAs, the chevrons that I have up top are the way they generally tend to proceed, right? So you identify your funding opportunities again depending on how unique or how novel your idea is and how it fits with the DoD. And you might spend a couple of months actually identifying the right funding opportunity. It can go faster if it makes, if there's a clear solicitation that might be out there to support the development of your product. Most of these solicitations tend to have a pre-proposal step where you need to provide a condensed version of a grant or a contract. The DoD looks over it and provides their quick insight as to whether they want to see a full proposal, and basically that is to say whether they're interested in your technology as a customer when it is developed. The pre-proposal prep and submit can take about 1 to 2 months. The invite for the full proposal usually takes about 1 to 3 months. The full application prep and submit takes about 2 to 3 months. And then it goes through the review and approval process. The review, happens through usually review panels. And then once you get a score and it is what they want to fund, you go through a negotiation period where you provide them additional information. They confirm that there's legal status for your company, and that everything looks good. That process can take about 3 to 6 months, at which point you get the award. Now, as you look at this, most of you might be thinking that, oh yeah, that takes a lot of time from when you start to when you finally get that money in hand, right? It does take considerable amount of time. Compliance at DoD is a non-negotiable, but there are many, many positives that far outweigh the negatives of this process, right? The DoD, by accessing the DoD, you get access to the largest and most stable funding opportunity that exists. DoD tends to be the world's largest customer, right? So you are looking at something that is stable, and that once you get your foot in the door is probably going to give you long-term sustainment. You're also developing technology that is critical for national security. So as Sam mentioned, some of the companies that earlier, you can become a company, a company of note in terms of having added to the national security efforts. As I said, offer long-term sustainment, because once you get that initial funding and you hit all of your milestone, it opens up doors for further funding, for additional funding sources directly through the DoD. as I mentioned with the SBI grants as well, once you get one of these grants, you get further credibility and further validation, especially in the eyes of outside investors as well, because now you have gone through a peer-reviewed process and your product is of interest and you have a customer, and so there's definitely that credibility and validation that comes along with it. And you get access to a very, very unique infrastructure and expertise that is not available in the commercial market, right? Because this is, we are talking about the DoD, it's a very different beast altogether. So this again is just talking about that same process, how we get there. We've talked also a little bit about the entry points already before, but for us at Grant Engine, what is important to us is our approach, right? It is important that we make sure you have a strict alignment to the solicitation that you're going to go after, right? If you do not align with it or you're not a good fit for it, we would never ever recommend that that is what you need to follow through. We also evaluate your readiness, make sure that you are at the right level to go after some of these funding mechanisms, because the DoD works on the technology readiness level, the TRLs as they are called. And if you're not at a certain TRL, some of these are not open to you, right? So we want to make sure we are evaluating your readiness and providing you a path for success and not, taking you down a slippery slope in any terms, right? And we want to make sure that your product has competitiveness. So we are there to assist and guide, you and champion you along the way as you work through getting funding. Some of the key factors involved with winning DoD grants and in general, you have to be able to talk to both a lay person as well as experts, because on the panel they are going to have lay folks as well as experts, and and so it needs to be able to talk to both those folks at their level. Language is of critical importance because you need to focus on the needs of the warfighter, right? Because you're trying to solve a problem that the warfighter has that is of critical need for national security. So you need to be able to articulate that well through your proposal. And to some extent, you need to be able to talk the language of the DoD. We talked about abbreviations and acronyms earlier. You need to be able to speak that language as you put together these proposals. You want to embed yourself in the DoD by getting support and finding champions for your solution. Preliminary results, are usually very key. This is why we talk about, as part of an approach, we talk about wanting to evaluate client readiness, because we understand what the reviewers are looking for, and therefore we are able to guide you in terms of, hey, are you ready with the amount of preliminary data you have? Or let's get in touch with folks on the DoD so that we can make that assessment. And then solicitations are, you need to be able to read the solicitations because they and thoroughly, and that's something that we do on our side, because there is always small gotcha points on these solicitations, things that if you don't follow can result in an administrative withdrawal of your proposal, right? A little bit like the Van Halen M&M analogy. I don't know if most people are familiar with it. Van Halen's their contract had a clause in it which said brown M&Ms, have a bowl of M&Ms in the dressing room, and there should not be any brown M&Ms. And if they found brown M&Ms in it, they knew that the organizers had not read through that contract, and that was a way for them to kind of know that everything that they put on the contract was read through and was being followed. So similarly with solicitations, they have a unique list of requirements, and each solicitation will have that. You need to be able to read through it and make sure that you are hitting every single one of them as part of your proposal. So at Grant Engine, we are proud to say we have a fantastic team of program managers, of lead writers, of commercialization plan writers, and external reviewers. We source folks from all over the US. We make sure they are the best of the best, and we are able to provide clients with the best possible team that they can work with and produce grants that are and contracts that are competitive and are winnable, right? And we have a very clear process, a delivery process as well that takes about anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks to complete, which is listed right on top of this slide, where we go all the way from having a kickoff meeting, making that grant strategy initially, and putting together the various drafts so that we are iterating on this process. We are able to do an external review where folks look at the grant prior to its submission, able to identify flaws in it, and we are able to correct that before we submit as well. All right, so with regards to next steps, so if as you choose to work with us, what would be the next steps that you would go through, right? Initially, we're going to establish an NDA, obviously, to make sure that we are protecting your information. And even within the company, it's only shared on a need-to-know basis. Once we have that signed, we will send you a product development funding survey. This is essentially like getting that grant thesis by you answering about 10 to 12 questions. We get a sense of what it is, what is the current standard of care? How are you, changing that paradigm of the standard of care? What do you have, in this, that's more on the healthcare side, but on the other side of it, it's more looking at, how are you, what is it that what is the issue that you're trying to solve? How novel is that solution? What have you done till date? How are you going to, what is it that you're looking to fund through finding an SBIR grant or a different DoD mechanism? Once we get that PDFS, as we call it, back, we will schedule a call with one of our subject matter experts who will walk through, make sure that we can identify a solicitation for you, that you're ready, and evaluate your technology so that we can provide you some guidance as to what the next steps are going to be. And this is critical for us to have this alignment between you and us, because we are here to be a collaborator with you, a partner with you, not just a fee-for-service company, right? Like, we want to be able to help you through your success and make sure that you have that successful completion to a grant proposal. I think the next slide is over to you, Sam.
Great. Yep. So we've got two, and please feel free to ask any questions along the way. We got two other elements I want to share that are quite useful. The first is in this context of contracting with the Defense Department and just the government in general. Having a solicitation or a contract mechanism is necessary, right? We have partnered with a company to really solve that problem with an already in place contracting mechanism that's called Matter. And this has already been negotiated, it's in place, and it has wide relevance for many different use cases and applications. So what this existing contract delivers is an already negotiated contracting mechanism. And really all that is needed to sell your product into an agency is a statement of work from the agency or sub-agency that wants it, and obviously available budget. So that's not a small thing, but it does address this very difficult problem of what contracting mechanism am I going to use? So in your journeys, as you find traction with your conversations and someone wants to try something, you can tack onto this mechanism. There's no need to compete for it. There is already sole sourced, so you don't have to justify that. There's flexible periods of performance, and there's no fee to the contracting agency to use it. So that's really attractive. There's a contracted ceiling of $500 million. So there's a lot, and I think to date, there's only been about $80 million used. So that's a really attractive platform to go. And these are the use cases where there's really anything that has an electronic component to it, where things are changing hands between systems. All of these areas would apply for the Matter vehicle. Thanks, Mr. Walsh or Ms. Walsh. We'll get to your question here in a second. So that Matter vehicle is a really effective way to engage, and a great tool if you've already got some traction. The other thing I want to just touch on is, as part of our platform, we have a very attractive compendium of free resources that are very useful. And these are complementary. We have a solicitation evaluation tool. So many times those solicitations are deep and long. You need to read them in full, but to get a bird's eye view, this AI-based tool captures the key data, gives you due dates, evaluation criteria, provides an eligibility quiz that's dynamic, and also sources and scouts for competitors. So that's a really useful tool. It does require registration, but a really effective tool. Matt, I've mentioned, when we get your materials under an NDA, we will do a complimentary subject matter expert review. We also have toolkits for strategic funding of how to go after that, the process tools that go a level deeper than what we shared today. We have an accounting and compliance checkup. There are new rules vis-a-vis DOGE. And we've also got profiles of customer funding models that go a level deeper on how to gain traction in the marketplace. If you are an existing client of Grant Engines, we have paid for a subscription to PitchBook, which is the most reliable place to get deal value, deal contact information. So we can source for you investor lists down to their email address, provide objective data on valuations for similar companies at your stage and industry subsegment. That's also useful for strategic partnering. So that is really what we wanted to cover. I don't see any questions, but again, as a next step to move forward, we'll reach out to you if you've had expressed an interest to hear from us, but you can find us on the internet and on our website, grantengine.com. You had asked about our fees for partnering, and it really varies, maybe obviously by the scope, and it varies quite a bit. So if I'll just pull back this slide, we touched on this early. This slide is really a summary of our different offerings. Our AI writing tool is $199 per month. And so that is less than going to Starbucks every day for a cup of coffee for the cost of a month. If we're going to do full flagship, we're in the less than 10K or in the mid double digit $1,000, so 15 to 20K for doing full flagship for a large pursuit. And then supporting, in these grantsmanship and external review, we do in the mid $1,000 level. For all of our offerings, we have a success fee, a nominal success fee as well. We also offer a retainer model that's usually 6 months, and sorry, let me go back. You get really however many grants and contracts we can reasonably pursue for you in that 6-month period, and that's usually on the order of $3,900 to $4,900 a month plus a nominal success fee. So that's a range of our fees for partnering. Do we help with funding strategic partners? Rohit, yeah, thanks for that question. We can certainly identify who they might be through PitchBook. We do have some limited bandwidth, and it's actually quite limited in terms of doing business development for you which is mission critical. We can help identify who those parties would be through PitchBook, but the act of business development, doing that actual outreach, we have a set of partners that are very capable in doing that and give us more bandwidth and depth to do that. So we, through our relationships, primarily, we can do that. Thanks, Eric, for your point. Appreciate that interest, and we're here when you need us. So we're right at just past time. If there's no other questions, we'll just say thank you for joining. And also, I should have mentioned this earlier, but definitely follow us on LinkedIn if you're not already. That'll be a good source for getting information. So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day.